Hello and welcome to the Oath and Staff podcast. I am A. David Singh, bringing you stories from people of medicine who serve humans and animals in unique and wonderful ways. In today's show, I am talking to Dr. Saroj Dubey, an award winning author, motivational speaker, and gastroenterologist. I met Saroj over 3 decades ago when I began my medical training at CMC Vellore in South India. What impressed me most about Saroj was his easygoing and friendly nature, peppered with dollops of good humor. Our paths diverged few years later when Saroj went on to pursue general medicine, followed by gastroenterology, while I plunged myself into neurosurgery. Over the years, Saroj has maintained his friendliness and good humor. That's something I have always cherished. So I was delighted when Saroj accepted to come on the show and talk to you about his new life path and how he is disseminating that knowledge and helping others. Welcome, Saroj. Welcome to Oath and Staff.
Hi, thank you so much, David. It's really an honor and a pleasure. And I'm so happy and delighted to be part of Oath and Staff. And we are really looking forward to this chat of ours.
The pleasure is mine, Saroj, and let's start at the beginning. What got you
Absolutely.
started in medicine, first as a medical student and later in gastroenterology? Are there any stories behind the decisions you made while choosing the steps in your career path?
Yes. So, David, my father, he's of course no more. He was a doctor, he was an anesthetist. And I used to, see him work, and he was quite sincere and dedicated person. And somehow it never really occurred to me to choose any other path. We are two siblings. My elder brother, he went on a different path, but for me, from right from the beginning, there was a thing that I would like to do medicine. Maybe it was a combination of seeing his dedication and sincerity, and as well as something attracted me to medicine. Whenever I used to go to the hospital, there was something about it which sort of charmed me and attracted me. So for me, actually, it was not a tough decision. Although I'll tell you, I'm from Jamshedpur. Jamshedpur, for the viewers, it's a small city in India where there are a lot of, there's a steel company. So actually, the majority of people from Jamshedpur, all my friends and most of my seniors, they used to opt for engineering because that was the background
Ah,
they had seen in their parents. So, but for me, that part was a no-brainer that I would choose medicine. So then, of course, I entered along with you. You came much 2 years later, and so I was in CMC. Now the thing is, and this is one thing, of course, like we all have some, there is something which crosses our path and makes us choose a particular thing. So the same thing happened to me. I was very much interested in psychiatry right from that time. I would say even during school time, I had that kind of attraction towards psychology, although I was very young at that time. But even during my medical college days, I was attracted to psychiatry, and I had almost made up my mind to take up psychiatry. And as you know, in our college days, what we used to do is after internship, we would probably take up a job as a casualty medical officer, and then probably we would get into one of the exams. And it so happened that during that time, just after the internship, my father, he had a heart attack.
oh,
So I went back to Jamshedpur, and I realized that I would have to spend some time with him because he kind of, apart from his heart attack, he had recovered, but mentally he was a bit shaken. And somehow there was something which told me that I should stay on for some months. So what happened is, when I was staying over there, then I also realized that probably I won't be able to do my post graduation from CMC because I wanted to be somewhere a little close by. And then I started preparing for the other entrance exams, the postgraduate exams. And during that time, when my father, he started recovering, and then he would ask me, so I said, yeah, I'm interested in psychiatry. So my father was an anesthetist. He said ki, Saroj, you are always been a good student, a brilliant student. It is my wish that you take up medicine, be in the mainstream. Somehow that feeling was there for him, that he was an anesthetist. It was not like the times now. Now anesthetists are always in the foreground. But at that time, their job was a bit restricted. So probably there was something in him which wanted me to take up medicine. So then, because I had started studying, when I gave the exams, then I got selected for medicine. So, although at that time there was a choice, should I go for psychiatry or medicine, but I think I went along with his wish and I did medicine. And once I did my medicine, then there was a senior in our batch, you must be knowing Ashish Mukhopadhyay. So he was also from Jamshedpur. So I had consulted him after medicine, what are the choices. He had taken up gastroenterology and he said that it's a good branch. So that part was kind of a passive because there were so many options. And frankly, if I were to choose, probably I would have taken up neurology. But since he was already there, I thought, okay, I like gastro, so I'll take it.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. First, your father influenced your choice to get into internal medicine, and then one of our former colleagues, Dr. Ashish Mukhopadhyay, also guided you into
Yes.
gastroenterology. Do you regret not having become a psychiatrist?
Ah, that's a very interesting question. So many people have asked me also, especially after the book, which we'll talk about, and my work nowadays. So, what I have also understood is that, as humans, we always think that we make the decisions. But actually, there are so many factors which go behind making one decision. But how did it come about? I was born in that background, I saw that background. Then someone probably in my childhood would have said that your father is a good doctor. So all these things, there are so many stimulus which we face it day in and day out, and ultimately we make a decision and we feel that it is our decision. And although we try to take the credit for all these decisions, but actually when you really go deep into it, you see that it's a kind of an illusion. So I would say one is that during my whole journey as a gastroenterologist, certain incidents happened which changed my whole way of thinking about and looking at life. And that took me to where I am right now. And probably if I had done psychiatry from the beginning, you never know, maybe this kind of situation would not have occurred. So I'm very grateful that it has happened the way it has happened, and it has brought me to this moment right now.
Saroj, I'm very eager to get started about talking about that, but I digress. You
Yeah.
have been an internist followed by a gastroenterologist for several decades now. If I were to ask you, what's the one thing you'd like to change about how medicine is practiced or how medicine is taught? What would be your advice?
Mhm. Now that's so relevant because I've given it quite a bit of a thought also over the years. I think one thing which we are never taught about in medical school is dealing with failures, dealing with heartbreak, and dealing with our emotions. This is something that we are never taught about. And as a doctor, over the last few years, I've talked to so many people, and most of them say that this is something which we should be taught about right from our college days, but there's not even an introduction to it. And as doctors, each of us are going to face it. You would have faced it in your journey. We know so many people who have faced it. So I would say there's so many things that which can be amended, but one thing I would suggest, that something which needs to be looked into, is the emotions which you encounter during your journey as a doctor, and dealing with disappointment and failure and heartbreak, which each of us is bound to do.
Oh, that's profound. Thank you for sharing it. In my life as a doctor, and of course, my wife is also a doctor, we have faced similar situation in which we felt several times that we needed some support. So I believe that you have given it a lot of thought, and that has shaped your life now. And that's the main reason why I was eager to have you on the show to talk about your unique holistic approach toward the mind and body. In addition to being a medical doctor, a gastroenterologist, you practice and teach mindful living, living in the present, and saying yes to all the experiences that the universe sends your way. You have spoken at length about your way of life in your new book, RX for Resilience, and your TED Talk, The Art of Doing and Being. But before we dive into your book and TED Talk, Saroj, will you give us a glimpse into your life philosophy and how you practice it in your day to day?
Absolutely, David. Yes, definitely. So I have always been a voracious reader right from my childhood days. But once I entered my medical college, MBBS, and all, then after that, doing medicine, appearing for the gastroenterology exams and clearing it. So during this time, that love for books and reading had, been suppressed because of the academic journey. So once I finished my DM in gastroenterology, that was sometime in 2006, then I again slowly started reading various kind of books. There was this book which I had come across, which is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Many of the viewers may have heard about it or read about it. And there were a few things which really struck me. There was something which I had never thought about, which I had never given so much thought. I had appeared for so many exams and done so well, but never during those years did anyone mention about the power of this moment, of being present, of being mindful. And I realized with a kind of a shock that for a large part of my life, I had been in this so called mechanical, or what we can call an autopilot mode. You have the ability to multitask, you're doing so many things, but we are never really present. And I realized that this is something which I had missed. And this is something very important for our own well being. It may not translate into more power or more degrees or more wealth. And probably that's why not too many people had talked about it. But this is something which actually struck into the core of me. And I started noticing that when I became more in the moment, more present, more mindful, that actually gave me access to a lot of, I would say, joy and happiness, even in the small so-called mundane activities. So I started learning more about it and started doing mindfulness and meditation. It was a kind of an anchor for me and helped me in the stressful period of dealing both personally and professionally. My motto and my aim is that apart from the time which I have set for my mindfulness meditation, the rest of the day, I try as far as possible to be mindful in all the activities. Apart from that, what I teach or guide people is that throughout the day, we have opportunities where we can be more present and more mindful. And in fact, I'll give you a short, there we call it the 4 T's of mindfulness, which is T, toilet, telephone, and transition. Now, we always take a tea or coffee break throughout the day. That itself can be a cue. If I'm having a cup of tea or glass of water, I can become mindful again. Maybe till that time I was, in that autopilot or mechanical mode, but when that tea or coffee comes, it helps me become more present. Then the second is the toilet. We use the washroom so many times. Now, a simple act of washing our hands. Whenever we are using our senses, like when we are washing our hands, the tactile, the touch of water on our skin, the touch of soap on our hands, that itself is a powerful way to come back to the present. As doctors, we keep on washing our hands maybe after seeing every patient or after a procedure. Each time that gives me a cue, okay, now I'm present again. Then the third thing is the telephone. We are always on our mobiles or whether we are on our laptop. So sometimes when a notification comes or a phone comes, you can mentally just say, okay, I'm present again. That is one cue. And transition. We are throughout the day we are in transition. Like in my job, suppose I'm sitting in the OPD, then I get up to go see a patient in the ward. So that transition time, it gives me a cue that I can become a little more present again, practice mindful walking from one room to another. Then when I go back, for example, I may go to the endoscopy room. That is again that period of transition where I can again come back. Then we have mindful eating. So probably till that time we are a bit chaotic and our minds are all restless. But when we sit, the senses, the touch, the aroma, all this can bring us back to the present moment.
Saroj, thank you for teaching us that. It's good to be reminded about the small things in life which keep us anchored in the present. And now, Saroj, since you and I are both authors, you will be familiar with the term inciting incident. For those tuning in, let me explain what it means. Inciting incident is an important event that happens in a story. In the beginning of the story, we meet the main character or the protagonist. They are going about their life without realizing that the universe has a surprise waiting for them round the corner. When that surprise arrives, there is an explosion in the protagonist's life, like a bomb going off or a tsunami hitting land. That is the inciting incident, and because of its disruptive nature, the inciting incident forces the protagonist along a different life path, something they would have never imagined for themselves. This reminds me about a story about Gautam Buddha. Before Buddha became Buddha, his name was Siddharth, and he was the prince of a small kingdom in Nepal. One day, while visiting the capital city, he saw a bald man with thick gray hair on his face. The man's skin was wrinkled and he trembled as he walked by. "What's wrong with him?" Siddharth asked his charioteer. "He is old," came the reply. Siddharth had never heard the word and wondered what old meant. "Will I become old?" "Everyone becomes old, my prince." Even though he was in his late 20s, Siddharth had never seen an old person before. His father, the king, had ensured that he led a sheltered life within the palace, surrounded by young, healthy people at all times. When he returned to that palace that evening, the old man stayed on his mind. A few days later, Siddharth saw another man in the city. This man was breathing hoarsely, his face and body covered with boils. "What is wrong with him?" Siddharth asked. "He is sick. There's nothing we can do. Let's leave him alone, my prince." Sick? Another new word and another discovery for the prince. He realized that a very different world lay just outside the palace walls. So he decided to continue his education in the city. Few days later, Siddharth saw a body burning on a pyre, the air thick with the smell of burning flesh. "He is dead," the charioteer explained. "Dead?" Siddharth had never heard that word either. "Will I be dead one day?" he asked. "Everyone must die, my prince." These discoveries, old age, disease, and death, perplexed Prince Siddharth, and he spent the next few days deep in thought about the human suffering he had seen. But he was still curious to learn more. On the next visit, he saw a man holding a begging bowl in his hand, but this man did not seem to be suffering. "What's wrong with him?" "He is an ascetic, my prince," the charioteer explained. "He has devoted his life to find the answer to human suffering." The look of absolute peace on the ascetic's face could only mean one thing. He knew something that Siddharth did not know. Over the following days, the more he dwelt upon old age, disease, and death, the more despair he felt about the impermanence of life and suffering of mankind. But he also remembered the look of peace and serenity on the ascetic's face. After a period of deliberation, Siddharth reached a decision. He had to give up his life of luxury and excess and lead a simple life like that ascetic. Only then could he find a way to end human suffering. Deep in the night, Prince Siddharth said a silent goodbye to his sleeping family and left the palace to begin his life as an ascetic. Years later, he attained enlightenment, and he was called Gautam Buddha. These four encounters, also called the four sights of Buddha, was the inciting event that intruded into Siddharth's life and sparked the desire in him to find a way to end human suffering. And that brings me to my next question, Saroj. What was the inciting incident that intruded into your life and led you along a new path? Will you share that story with everyone who has tuned in?
Absolutely, David. And I think the background you gave to this was very, very well expressed. The way you talked about the inciting event and how it suddenly appears like a tsunami and it blows you away, and what remains can be, very profound and very transformative. So I was going along this path, doing my meditation, mindfulness, and things were going on quite well. And there was a lot to look forward to. And there was this particular lady who came to me with stones in the common bile duct. So we do an ERCP, a process, endoscopic procedure called a ERCP to remove the common bile duct stone. So she had come to me. She was around 30 years old lady, not very symptomatic, but she wanted to get the thing done and subsequently for a gallbladder surgery. She had a son around 8 or 9 years, and just before she came, I was just about to go for a conference to Barcelona. And since this was a procedure which we do commonly, I suggested that I'll be away for a week or so. I could ask my colleague to do the procedure for her. And I forgot about it. And in fact, I thought that she would have got it done. When I came back, my first patient in the OPD was this particular lady. And she said, "No, doctor, we wanted you only to do it. And that's why we waited for you to come back." So I said, "Okay," and we posted her. And the procedure went along as expected. But after the procedure, after a few hours, when I went to see her, then she had very excruciating pain. Now, after ERCPs and all, patients do have pain. So I got an X-ray done, and unfortunately, it was found that there was a leakage in her intestine, which we see as a perforation. I discussed with the surgeon, who said that given her age, we shouldn't delay and we should go for a corrective surgery to take care of the perforation. So that was done within 24 hours. The surgeon also said that okay, they had found that area and it kind of sealed it. So we were expecting that it was a setback, but hopefully the patient would recover in a few days. But somehow the patient's condition kept on deteriorating. Even after the surgery, she had to be put on a ventilator, developed ventilatory associated pneumonia and infections. And in short, she, kind of went downhill. And ultimately, we couldn't save her. At the end of
Oh,
3 weeks, she passed away. Now, David, you are a doctor and you know all about it and how complications do happen, unfortunately, even with the best of intentions. And as doctors, this is something which it is not unusual for us. It's very sad, very unfortunate, very tragic, but we learn to deal with it and kind of bounce back, and we have to somehow confront the situation and move on. Something about that particular case, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was her age, maybe the image of her child, or the fact that this could have been done by someone else, but she waited only for me and had to. There was something which really broke my heart. And I was into a lot of, I would say, a combination of emotions of guilt, fear, sadness, disappointment, despair. Now, the thing is, what happened is that the patient, of course, unfortunately, she passed away. The relatives, they were, of course, in deep anguish, but very furious also about how did this happen and how did they lose this patient. So there was their anger to be dealt with. Then they had taken it up in the social media, and the hospital also was, questioning me, what happened, how did this go wrong. And so there was this, all these emotions, my emotions, my sadness, my guilt. Then there was that fear, deep fear about the consequences of it, what the outcome of it would be, what would the humiliation I had to face, what my colleagues would think. So there were so many things. Again, this is something that we as doctors have to deal with it, and I know that everyone kind of deals with it in their own way. But my study so far of mindfulness, meditation, and other things, somehow it made me intuitively realize that I had to open up and completely embrace these emotions. Now, David, the thing is, with we as a society, I would say, and especially among males, we are fairly emotionally illiterate. Whenever some strong emotion comes, whether it can be anger or fear or sadness, we try to brush it away, we try to suppress it, either this does not exist, or more commonly we try to distract ourselves. It can be by anything, by alcohol or smoking or drugs, or trying to distract ourselves by seeing some movies or Netflix or TV shows. Very, very rarely do we confront or embrace these emotions. But something already I was on that path in smaller ways by my mindfulness and meditation, and I realized that the only way out was through. And only if I was able to completely open up and confront these emotions did could I kind of transcend it. So that was my practice for the next few weeks. I would sit with all these emotions. I would just be still and sit and allow all the emotions, that fear, that sadness, that despair, everything to just be there. And what happened was, in a way, I would say, very transformative. Initially, of course, it felt as if these emotions would overwhelm me, and probably I couldn't even manage to sit for a few minutes in the beginning. But what happened is, gradually I would just stay with the discomfort, with the fear, the terror, and slowly around these emotions, there was a still space which had started appearing, which was very calm. And in some ways, it was, I would say, surprisingly blissful also. And then in a flash, I understood what, the scriptures have said, like the peace that passes all understanding. I think this is from the Bible, where you may be having a lot of emotions, but at the same time, there is a surrounding still presence. And I could understand what the meaning of the phrase, that proverb, the peace that passes all understanding, was all about. There was that peace which should not have been there. I was feeling so awful, but there was this. And I realized that only when we are totally open and present with our darkest emotions does that alchemy take place, which we can call, as which I've described in the book, as emotional alchemy, and we get access to a deeper place which is very still. And this was so transformative because, and over the period of years, even now, it has deepened. And what I also realized is that there is a space in all of us which is fearless, which can confront any kind of emotions and still be calm. So there is the fear, but when you are totally open into it, you gain access to a state of fearlessness. And that is what I understood over a period of time. And this, of course, months passed, and the incident, obviously, it was still there, but this feeling of stillness, that presence, that had only deepened over a period of time. And being able to access these dark emotions so closely also made me gain access to what is more joyful within us. There's a very nice phrase by Khalil Gibran which says that the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain, because the container is the same. And if you allow it to expand with all the emotions, maybe it can be your deepest emotions, you will be able to access even more joy. And that is what happened over the subsequent period. And all these experiences made me, realize that this is something I would like to share with everyone. Because for me, it was this particular incident, a medical complication. For someone else, it can be maybe a divorce, a separation, death of someone very close to them, or a sudden change in fortunes, or, a sudden change in job, any kind of setback. And I realized that the only way we can deal with it is by being totally open to it, embrace it, bring it closer, and then you can see how, that shift occurs.
Saroj, thank you for sharing that deep and personal story and how it brought about the transformation in your life. Uh,
Yeah, and
so
if I
that
can
is
add,
something, of course.
when I was writing, the thought came. I made a first draft, and when it came close to being printed and published, suddenly there was a tremendous amount of fear in me. You know, I thought till that time it was all in the flow. I was writing, I described all this, I was open to my vulnerability, and suddenly the thought came, what are you doing? It's not as if I've retired or I've changed my job. I'm still an active practicing gastroenterologist. And I thought, if I am so open with my failure, my complication, then people read about it, what are they going to think about me, about my competence, about my efficiency? And for some time I felt, this is not the time where I would like to share all this, and I should hold back till maybe a few years when I'm close to retirement or something. But again, there was something which told me from within that I need to share this. Something told me that probably a lot more people would like to hear from it. They may heal from it, and it may, probably affect their life in some other ways. And I'm happy to say that after 1 year, getting the mails from people and hearing them discuss it, I feel that, okay, I have succeeded in some extent because my journey has helped and healed a lot many others.
Thank you. That's profound. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for writing about your experiences in the form of a book. Let's talk about that book. I know, I am very eager to hear more about it. So, this book is titled RX for Resilience.
Mm.
And Saroj, as you know, I publish books on my own. That's called indie publishing or self publishing. So, I'm always curious to hear about authors like you who have found success by following a different publishing path. How did you go about finding an agent for your book and then a publisher? And how long it took for your book to get published after you signed a contract? I'm sure many of our listeners are authors themselves or want to
Yes.
become authors, so they would be interested in hearing about your experience.
Yeah, so that's definitely, I'll be very happy to talk about it, David. And in fact, after I tell you my part, I would like to hear your journey as an author also, because I'm sure a lot of the viewers would be, very interested. So when I wrote the book, I was quite sure that I would have to self publish it, because I felt that which traditional publisher would be interested in a new author, a doctor writing, and this is his first book. But I was very sure that I wanted it to be edited well. So there's this lady who's a friend also, Suma Burgess. So there was a magazine called Life Positive, in which I had contributed a few articles earlier. She was the editor. She had by that time retired. So I just mailed her and talked to her. I said that, Suma, this is what I've written, and I'm planning to get it self-published. But I want you to edit it. So whatever your charges are, I will be happy to do it. But just do a good job of editing, because she's a good editor. So after a few weeks, she rang me and said that, Saroj, I've gone through more than half the book, and the insights in it are really very brilliant. Even she said that she had been in this path for, she had been the editor of Life Positive for so many years, but some of the things which I had discussed and talked about were very new and very transformative even for her. So she suggested that, why not let us try a traditional publisher first. And to her mind, the first name was Hay House, because they are, more into personal growth and self help. So she said that let's give it a try, And if it doesn't work out, then we'll always go back to the self publishers, and we can do that. So I said, okay, if you're confident, that gave me the confidence that this is something which we can take across. So the good part was that she knew someone in the publishing company of Hay House. So what she told me is that what I can do for you is I can ask them to go through it early, because there's a lot of delay often. They have a lot of manuscripts there, and sometimes I think by the time a manuscript comes to their notice, it's quite a few months. So she said ki, that part they'll go through it a bit earlier. But after that, it all depends on them whether they want to go ahead. So then after I sent the first three chapters initially, then after that, after I would say after 1.5 months, I got a mail saying that they liked the initial three chapters, but would only make a this thing final statement after they read the whole manuscript. I was very excited and thrilled, as you can understand. So of course I sent him the whole manuscript, and after a couple of months I got a mail saying that we like it and we'd like to go ahead. Suma had already told me that the main difference between a traditional and self-publisher is that time period. So I said I'm not in any hurry. I would love it if Hay House publishes it. So they had said that it can take up to 1 to 1.5 years by the time it comes out in print. So I would say from the time they accepted it till the time it came out in
Mhm.
print, it was 1 year. So
1 year.
as it was 1 year, so that was okay. I was even ready to wait for 1.5 years, but it came out in 1 year. When someone knows that Hay House has published it, it is something which can contribute to their personal growth or self help. So that way, I'm quite happy about it. And I would like to know, David, about your journey and what your views are about publishing traditional as well as self.
Saroj, I'll be very brief because we want this episode and our listeners to hear more from you.
Mm,
I published my first book in 2016 and then
mm,
the next one in 2020.
mm,
So initially, when I started writing full time, that was, I believe, in 2014, I
mm,
too had thought of going and pitching a literary agent and then finding a traditional publisher. But while I was writing, I was also researching about the paths to publish. Two
mm,
paths stood out. One was traditional publishing, in which you find a literary agent followed by a publisher. And then there was indie publishing, independent publishing, which is also called self publishing, in which the author is also the publisher of their own book.
mm,
During those 2 years, from 2014 to 2016, I realized that there were profound advantages of being a self published author. The
mm,
main advantage was that we retain creative control of our books and our intellectual, that is our intellectual property. That is something I did not want to sacrifice by going through people employed in the publishing house like an editor.
mm,
So creative control was important to me. I wanted my vision to come across and not another person's vision intruding into my work. Secondly, as far as royalties are concerned, for an ebook, a self published author retains 70% of the royalties, and for a print book, we get about 50 to 60% royalties when
yes.
we make sales. And lastly, as far as marketing is concerned, I felt that if I do the marketing on my own, I will have complete control over that.
Mm,
Whereas if I go with a publisher, then I will be at their mercy as far as
mm,
marketing is concerned.
is concerned. Yes.
If if we have a publisher who's aligned with your vision and your book, they will market it according to their budget. But there are other publishers who don't do any marketing at all,
Mm,
and then it's ultimately the author who has to do it. So for these
mm,
reasons, I felt self-publishing is a good path for somebody like me who wants to retain the creative control and who wants to be on top of marketing. Now, there were certain upfront costs associated with self-publishing, like getting a cover designed and getting the editing done. However, even though I got it done, I retained my vision about the cover and the final decisions I made whether to follow the editor or not. So, again, that's part of having creative control over one's intellectual property. In this in this current climb of publishing, self-published authors have got vast resources to get their books published and
published.
to connect with readers. Saroj, if you invite me later on to your podcast or YouTube channel, I will talk at length about this issue, but for
Absolutely, I
now
will. Yes.
we will keep the focus on you. People make buying decisions based on the question WIIFM. That means, what's in it for me? If they can answer the what's in it for me question, it's likely that they will buy. Saroj, tell us who's the ideal reader for your book and what's in it for them when they read your book, RX for Resilience.
Okay. Yes. So, David, I'll say that, of course, the book caters to a wide variety of audience, but especially it is for someone who is facing some kind of a setback, some disappointment, some what one can call a failure of some kind, or is at the crossroads and there is a lot of uncertainty and a feeling of not knowing what is happening. Because I would say that when I was undergoing all these this journey and these emotions, there was a lot of questions, and at a certain point of time, for me there was, what is all this happening, where is it going? And there was an absolute lack of any certainty. And what I realized is that not having certainty, when all your certainties collapse, can also be a very powerful state to be in. We normally don't like it. We like things to be certain. We like to have a to do list or a map in front of us. That is all good. But sometimes when life throws you a curveball and you don't know what is happening, that is the time where you will make your deepest discovery. That is the time, David, where you will ask yourself the question, what is happening? Why am I here? Who am I? And there's a chapter dedicated to exploring who am I in the book, where I would say led me to a discovery of something which was far more expansive and beyond my imagination than what throughout my life as a professional I had been accustomed to imagining. For example, I had always imagined myself to be a doctor, I'm a professional, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother. And suddenly, when it all collapsed, it made me question, is there something beyond that also? Beyond that label of Dr. Saroj Dubey, what happens if hypothetically someone loses their entire memory? Does it mean that they're not existing? They're still existing. There's something there. And actually this whole journey led me to that. When something catastrophic happens, when something tragic happens, our immediate reaction is, oh, why, oh god, why has this happened to me, and what did I do, and this shouldn't be happening, and we try to just close that chapter. But actually that chapter may lead you to something which is far beyond what our limited understanding is.
Yes, I am sure viewers and listeners would take advantage of this opportunity, and I will put the link to your book in the show notes below. Now, let's talk about the TED Talk. Which one came first, your book or the TED Talk?
So actually that's very interesting. Now the book had gone for publishing, and as I said, it took a year. Now when I was talking to some of my friends and colleagues about the book and the things I explored about happiness, mindfulness, things like that, being and doing, so a lot of them said, Saroj, you are into meditation and mindfulness, but I don't have the time. I'm too busy, I don't have the time. Can you suggest some things which do not take much of my time in the day, but can bring me a sense of peace and well being? So, this had actually set me thinking. I said, okay, now from that book, what are the things that I could sort of share in the form of a talk which can help people who have that lack of time and are not willing to spend too much time on their growth? So, that idea came that How about, talking about mixing being and doing? Now, David, we are all into doing most of the time. We are into whether it is our work or something, we are doing one thing after the other, but we very rarely pause. We very rarely take that step back. And sometimes when we go into this being phase, this stepping back, then sometimes we have the fear that if I step back too much, then I will not, I'll fall behind, I'll fall behind. So, what I had experienced and what I wanted to share is that this dance of doing and being can be merged together. You can do also, but when you mix it with taking those pauses, stepping back a bit, it brings a lot more happiness and joy. So there were these six strategies which I had discussed in the TEDx talk. So I'll just briefly name them. Some of this we have talked about. One is presence or mindfulness. How being present, being mindful, taking those small gaps of those four T's we talked about can really change the quality of our life. The second is a very interesting concept called Nixon, which is a Dutch form of non doing. We keep on doing, and even in our Sundays or weekends, we try to fill up with something. In India, we have a lot of conferences going on Sundays, but we need to just take out some time where you're not doing anything. You are just sitting or lounging or whatever. And when we give these periods of non doing, it can make our doing even more fruitful. Then the third is space. Space is about taking out those small pauses where you can give maybe even a 2 minute space where you're just grounding yourself, becoming more present. And when we get access to this space, there's a very nice quote by Viktor Franklin that between any stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is the power to choose our response. And in that choice lies our growth and freedom. So, what happens if mostly people say something, we react. We immediately react. Oh, how can you say this? Or how dare you say that? But there is that space where you can choose to respond rather than react. And that actually increases when we take out these small pauses throughout our day. Then the fourth is awe. If I talk about awe, we immediately think about either the Taj Mahal or the Niagara Falls. But actually, when we become more present, there is awe and wonder in the smallest things. Maybe it is just the scenery outside your window, or you see your pet, or these moments of awe and wonder, small moments throughout the day. Then the fifth is, which is called savoring. There in throughout the day, there are certain moments which are very pleasurable. They may be very small, like you have a tasty snack or a great cup of coffee, or someone gives you a good compliment, like, "Oh, David, what a wonderful podcast," and we brush it aside. Oh, no, no, nothing like that. But actually, there is a lot of research showing that when we take out a few seconds and just savor these good moments, it becomes a kind of a habit and it increases the positive neuroplasticity. And the sixth is flow. So you may be aware of the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which talks about when we are totally immersed in an activity where we lose all sense of time or place. Maybe it is playing or music or reading or something. So that is actually flow. And we often think that, okay, flow is mostly for musicians and sportsmen, but we all encounter it. And I realized that I got into flow by dancing. Although I'm a terrible dancer, my wife tells me that I don't know how to dance, but I really enjoy it. So, what I'm saying is, we just have to recognize what is the thing that gives us flow and make out some time either during the day or maybe an hour during the week. So these are the things which I wanted to share, how we can use these simple strategies. It does not take any time, and it helps us merge that doing and be.
I have seen your TED talk. It was really an eye-opening one, and
Wow, I'm so
we will have
happy.
the link to it in the show notes and also on the YouTube channel.
That's
However, what I
wonderful.
did not see is
Mhm.
you dancing. So
It's good. Yeah, I think that must have saved you.
So that
I
is
would say.
something that we should plan when we meet next time, and we'll take a video of it
Absolutely.
and probably post it for our viewers again.
Absolutely, David. It'll be a great fun activity.
You are actively involved in teaching others about mindful living and saying yes to the present. Do you teach in person or do you have online courses? How can people who are interested attend your courses?
Okay, yeah. So it's a combination of both, David. So sometimes some people, sometimes a patient also who knows about it, or someone who has read it, they may approach me. And if they are somewhere in the vicinity, sometimes I take classes of even two or three or four. If I feel that they are really interested, it's not so much about the monetary fact as the fact that if they are interested and want to learn, then I can take classes. Then often online also I take, maybe in groups of five or six together. So anyone who's interested in knowing more, I think I've got a website also. That's drsaroj.com. But you can also share my email and my number also. I'm quite accessible on WhatsApp. So they can directly contact me, because this is something which I'm very passionate about, and we can always, arrange something about it.
Thank you for that. Of course, I will put your contact information down below, and our viewers who are interested in connecting with you can take advantage of it. Saroj, this is a question I ask all my guests. What legacy do you want to leave for our planet?
So, David, this is a really wonderful question, and I would love to give an answer. So, I would like to be known as someone who has himself lived with an open heart, and I would say it's a wholehearted living where I'm able to embrace all my emotions rather than just pick and choose. These are the good ones, the happy ones, the cheerful ones, suppressing the dark ones, the so-called sad or the painful ones. I would like to be known as someone who has been able to live wholeheartedly, embracing everything that is coming my way, and who has been able to guide others along this path. So even if I'm able to guide maybe two people or even five people, just to say yes to what is happening right now, not resist what is happening, be open to it, and being open to discovering a whole new dimension of whatever may be happening, then I'll be happy. And I would say this is the legacy I would like to be known as.
Saroj, thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and it's wonderful seeing you after many
This
years. And
likewise,
I believe
David, it's been so wonderful.
we should talk more often.
Absolutely.
And that's all for today, folks. Many thanks for tuning in and subscribe for more.